Hi, this is Gurasi Singh, and you're listening to my Thick Accent podcast. So, how many of you have thought of starting a vlog at some point in your life, or being an immigrant who wanted to document the journey from your home country to flying abroad and finding home away from home? I'm sure many of you have at least once thought about it, but then the fear of judgment kicks in and you lack motivation to do so. Well, my guest today has found a hack that makes it easy for you to get comfortable in front of the camera and put yourself out there for the world to see. She's a Vietnamese girl who was born and raised in Russia. She spent initial years of her life there with her parents and then immigrated to Canada in 2017. Let's hear more from her how the immigrant mindset helped her in her Canadian journey and the hack that let her start her own vlog, The Russian Vietnamese Girl. Please welcome Mika.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Gorasis, for having me today. I'm really happy to be able to share my experiences.
Perfect. So, Mika, before we talk about the hack and your life in Canada, I want to go back to the time you spent in Russia. Tell us, how was it like growing up there?
I have nothing else to say but happy things about growing up in Russia. I've lived most of my life in Russia before moving here to Canada, and I had a very happy childhood. Growing up, even though I'm Vietnamese, I still felt like I'm more Russian than Vietnamese because I was born then. All of my friends are Russians, and my first language is pretty much Russian. I speak Russian the best out of all three languages. So in general speaking, I have nothing bad to say about growing up in Russia, but being Vietnamese.
Like, was there any Vietnamese community that you were part of?
That's a great question because many people might not know, but there's actually a very big Vietnamese community in Russia. So I actually grew up within a lot of Vietnamese people. So that's the part where I felt like, oh, I'm actually Vietnamese because a lot of the people that surrounded me were Vietnamese, like friends of my parents and other children, like other people my age that were also born and raised in Russia, but being Vietnamese. So there's quite a few people like me around me.
Interesting. And Mika, you also mentioned in one of your videos that you might feel like you don't belong. And here I'm talking about being in Russia and alternating between being a Russian and a Vietnamese. Tell us, what did you mean by that?
Thanks for bringing up that question. I know I love talking about this, about like the sense of belonging, because it's something that I struggle with a lot growing up. And the reason is because, of course, I was born and raised there, but obviously I don't look like most Russians, if you can tell. And also, another fact, maybe people might want to know, but when you're born in Russia, you don't get the Russian citizenship right away. You have to apply and go through the application process like any other immigrant, even though you're born there, if your parents are not Russian citizens. So that's something that always made me feel like, oh, I'm actually not Russian. So that's like something that makes me feel very divided, having all these Russian friends, speaking Russian, eating Russian food, learning everything about Russian history while still having, a Vietnamese passport and having just a different things that I do at home because my parents are still Vietnamese. So it's like living in two worlds, which is actually fascinating if you think of it.
It indeed is fascinating. It is like living two different lives. Outside of your house, you are acting Russian with your friends at school or college, and then you come back home to your Vietnamese parents and act Vietnamese. But I know, Mika, you also said that you always had the American dream when you were young, just like all of us. But then you found Canada a better option to immigrate. So tell us, why Canada? Why you chose Canada to be your next step?
Basically, growing up, we all watch so many American movies and we fantasize about living in North America and having this cool life. So, yes, talking about American dream, you're right. I had that growing up, a very big one. And then I started having friends, being in high school and then in university. I started having friends that actually move abroad before I did. Because I did my bachelor back in Russia, but a lot of friends did the bachelor in the US or in Canada already. So during those years where I already have friends that live abroad and study abroad, I started learning more about the countries, like what is it like living in the US and what it is like living in Canada. And one of my best friends actually moved to the US first, and then she moved to Canada. So she had two of these perspectives, and talking to her and a lot of other friends of mine, I realized that Canada sounds like a better option because immigration is easier. Sounds like Canada is just more peaceful, and something about it just was very taking my interest basically to move here.
Interesting. But Mika, how was the whole immigration process for you like moving from Russia to Canada?
I never thought of it as an immigration. I always tell this because when you move to study, it's almost like you're just going to school. You're just going to another school. It can be another city, it can be another country, but it just didn't feel much as, oh, I'm actually immigrating, right? Because you have the whole school behind you that you talk to. So you apply for the school, and when you got in, it's going to be so many people and administration offices that help you with getting your visa, setting up things, where to stay, and with a lot of resources you can talk to and people you can talk to about this. It didn't feel that complicated at all.
It is an interesting perspective. Students do feel very pressurized when they move abroad, but there are definitely people to help them, especially within the school environment, maybe any student associations, or maybe even administration sometimes, like you mentioned. So, since Mika, Russia and Canada both are very westernized and has similar weather as well to some extent, was it an easy transition for you to come here?
If we talk about weather, definitely it didn't feel any different to me. It of course, yeah, it of course differs from city to city, but from where I'm from, which is Moscow, we have all four seasons as well. So moving to Canada, living in Kamloops first, where there are also four seasons, very cold winter and hot summer, and now in Toronto, it's not much difference. So if we're talking about the weather here, I love it. I mean, it just feels like home to me.
Okay, so did you experience any culture shock when you came here?
Yeah, as you mentioned, both countries are very westernized. And I don't think that I had a huge culture shock or anything. On top of that, I have to mention that I've always living almost like an immigrant life, right? Being a Vietnamese, Russia, I grew up with that mindset that like, oh, I still have to do my documents every year, or like, I have to still take care of those things that probably others don't have to worry about who are citizens of the country, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
So moving here and just living the same life I used to, I didn't feel too much of like a culture shock, so to say.
So you were saying that since your parents were immigrants from Vietnamese, that immigrant mindset was passed down to you and that really helped you a lot to live your life in Canada.
I would say so, yes.
Okay, so Mika, when you moved to Canada, how was your first day? What was going on in your mind?
How was my first day coming to Canada? Well, even if I mentioned that, yes, I know that I was just moving to school, but at the same time, a lot of us who wants to move abroad have this dream of actually staying abroad. So I remember particularly flying this maybe 15 hours long flight. It was tough because right before like going on the flight, it was the moment when I figured that maybe this is it. Maybe I will never live in Russia again. And it's definitely difficult. It's seeing my dad almost tearing up when I'm leaving, seeing my brother first time, hugging me. Brothers don't do that. Like, yeah, my sister is like leaving. So the hardest part was probably understanding that this is the new life. This is where I am now, and now now it's time to grow up, pretty much.
Wow. I can absolutely relate to it, Mika. I clearly remember the day when I was leaving. Everybody came to see me off at the airport. My mother was almost crying. I had my all friends and family, my nephews and niece there, and I did not shed any tears, but deep inside, I knew that, okay, so I am moving abroad and I might just stay there. And whenever next time I am visiting, I'm literally just visiting. I'll be going back in few weeks.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mika, you always talk about networking in your videos, and it did play a major role in helping you land a job even before you were graduated. Tell us all about that.
I do. I am a big believer in networking because I've experienced a lot of things that came my way itself based on trying to network my way in. So first is I got my first ever like good job, not like a certain part-time usually students would take, but like in a consulting company when I was doing my MBA. And that was, yeah, I believe that was because not only networking, but being very, very proactive. Basically, how it happened is that during the school time, I was so proactive in doing, being in different school clubs, university, like student clubs, and trying things out, and actually being proactive in giving suggestions on, like, how to improve certain processes and certain things that clubs could do, or different projects that were built at school. I would just go to the offices of the professors that were, like, let's say, running those projects and say that, hey, I think this is what you can do to maybe engage more students.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I love that kind of things. And I would just, even though I actually grew up as a very shy person, from Canada, I made a decision that here, now it's time to grow. And I had a lot of support from friends. So that's how I started learning to be more engaged in different university stuff and going out there and actually, having my voice. So because I was doing that, my then manager noticed me and reached out to me asking if I want to work for him. And I was more than, like, I was so happy. That was like the first time I literally just got reached out to and say, hey, do you want a job, a good job that would help me, in the future, having Canadian experience and such. So networking is definitely a big, big thing that you can do to land a good job, to meet right people, and to just grow as a person.
I totally agree with you, Mika. Whenever students move abroad to study, they are just engrossed in getting the good grades, which is obviously essential. But at the same time, I would recommend them to put themselves out there, reach out to people, connect with them, just to know more about the industry, nothing else. And whenever next time any positions are available, that person will have you in mind and they might reach out. Just exactly like how the manager reached out to you, Mika, and asked you if you would like to work for him. Now, Mika, being an immigrant, you are all on your own. You don't really have a family to rely upon or the connections your family might have. And that's where the survival mode switches on. And you also went through the similar self exploration phase last year, where you also stopped posting on a YouTube channel for a while. Please tell us, what was that phase like? What were your actual concerns and how did you handle those?
That question is actually very deep. I can talk a lot on that because it felt like a very long time. So you talk about last year, the moment when I graduated from school, and here it is, adult life. Finally, you have to start earning money. You start to have to take care of yourself. There's no teachers that support you anymore. You are on your own, and it's definitely difficult times. And that's when I realized that, oh, this is no jokes anymore. I can't just, being in a student club and hoping that this is going to bring me something. You could have to actually put in hours of work to figure things out. And growing up, I guess because like having such difficult different things in culture wise, I also had a difficulty on figuring out what I want to do and who I want to become. So during and a lot of people I think go through this phase, especially after graduation. It's when you finally feel stuck. Like, okay, what do I want to do? What is the next step? And I felt like that because COVID hit as well, right that month when I moved. And I just felt it was difficult to find a job. And my mind started going to everywhere. Maybe I can get this type of job, that type of job. I was very unfocused. And so I started this YouTube channel of mine to start exploring myself and see what I want to talk about. What is something that I'm passionate about? And that's why I started the channel, to have the exploration of my own. And yeah, it's been going. It's still going. I have a better clarity on what I want to do, and I think it's always a good way to start. If you don't know what to do, just start exploring and do something. Take actions about it.
You did say it right, Mika, that initially when you come, everything is hunky dory, and then eventually when you complete your school and you step into the real world, you are out from that four walls of your classroom, and you have to figure out that what I really want to do, what job I would really love to do, and also to find a job that will help you get your permanent residency. And then the COVID was just like an added pressure. And Mika, you did also talk a little bit about a YouTube channel. I would want you to tell us more about it, the channel, and the hack that you discovered that helped you start your vlog in 2020.
Thank you so much. You've been hyping up this hack so much that I really want to share it, and I hope this can be useful. Yeah, basically, what happened is that as I've mentioned already, I've always been a little on the shy side. And coming here, I've decided that I want to do this. I want to explore myself and see what I'm capable of. Because back home, you have your parents, you have friends, you have people that know you, and you have a network of parents network and such. And so you always have someone to fall behind to help you. But here you're on your own. And that's when I started, shaping myself as the person I am today. And I wanted to start a YouTube, but I didn't know how can I do it? Because I'm not so comfortable talking in front of camera. I'm not so confident about even speaking of my English speaking skills. I was honestly not that confident about it first when I came to Canada. So if I will do vlogs, it's going to be in English because I like speaking in English. Am I going to be confident enough being in front of camera speaking English to wide YouTube audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to start going out of that shell of being so inconfident about it and not being sure, I created basically an Instagram that is actually not my personal Instagram, but just a separate page. And the reason is because my Instagram, the personal one, still has a lot of random followers, people from school, and it's a lot of eyes on you, right? If I start posting something there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to create something smaller, just that would make me feel more comfortable first, the initial step to take. So I just created a different Instagram page because, creating stories is much faster and easier than creating whole videos on YouTube right away.
Of course.
So I thought that it would be a good idea to create a page and start vlogging my day-to-day on the Instagram stories of that little Instagram that I create. And, all your close friends are always the one who will support you. Even if they don't, they will at least show up, So I added all my close friends that I knew that would be there and watch my stories just because they're interested in my life. So I had this first 10 people, 15 people that just followed my, let's say, journey that I started. And I vlogged every day on the Instagram stories just to get used to the camera, get used to speaking to people and vlogging my life and talking about things that I'm interested in without being scared that they're going to be people that I don't know so well judging me.
I love that. And I think you have mentioned that always surround yourself with the people who are only going to lift you up.
Definitely. As I've mentioned, right? A lot of friends that I choose to be next to me are the ones who will definitely support me and understand what I'm like going through. Because if you start a YouTube, a blog, a podcast, right? You might have friends that not understanding it. They want you to be, let's say, an accountant, but you are now having a podcast. Like, what are you doing with your life? I mean, I've experienced there like people like that, and I'm not saying like cut them loose, but you just want to keep people close to you who actually will support you and want you to grow to the person that you want to be instead of what their perspectives are.
Definitely, it's so important to surround yourself with the people who are positive, who are going to challenge you to become a better person and will provide you with the constructive feedback. So, to all the listeners, please go check Mika's channel, YouTube channel. It's called Russian Vietnamese Girl. I'll put the link to the channel in the show notes as well. So, Mika, you also have another channel called Culture Room. Tell us, how did that happen and what is it all about?
Culture Room is like my baby. It's a little project. It's little but big to me because it started so little. It started with a partner. My partner is Sagar, and we met on LinkedIn talking about networking here. Basically network into each other um, lives, and he first approached me for his YouTube channel, which is Immigrant, talking about immigration and schools in Canada, and I talked about my MBA program there. But then we grew to became friends and started talking about these projects. And he had this idea of bringing people from different cultures together to talk about their background and to have fun with it, not only just sharing and talking, but actually having different experiences. And at that time, I also had the similar idea on my channel, on my vlogging, where I started doing travel without traveling. So basically related to culture, related to people and food. And it just nicely put together, and we created this channel. We named it Culture Room because it's related to culture and we do it in a room. And it was fascinating because we're still doing it. We're still putting up videos and inviting people from different countries and cultures, and we learned so much from that as well. So it's you have to check it out.
I definitely have checked the videos and they are just hilarious. I'll recommend all the listeners to check the channel as well. I'll put the link in the show notes. Okay, Mika, so now we are in the final segment of the podcast. I call it the final MTA talk. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. You can answer them in one word or a sentence or however you feel like. The idea is just to know more about you. So, our first question is, what advice would you give to Mika, who is in the initial months of landing in Canada?
Right before she lands, when she's so worried in the airplane, knowing that she's far away from her family now, I would just tell her to not to be worried because everything is going to be okay. Everything's going to turn out the way it's supposed to. And there's nothing to worry about.
Okay. So, what situations make you awkward and why?
Every time I have to go on a stage and do some sort of public speaking, it terrifies me and makes me feel awkward. I'm sure a lot of people can relate, but my very first week in Canada, I went to a public speaking workshop at school, and I was called on to speak about random things because they just call up different people to practice the public speaking. And as I've mentioned, I wasn't confident about my English skills yet. I wasn't so confident talk to people at all. And so when I was standing there on the stage and the question was thrown at me, hey, talk about a cat that was chasing a dog or some sort, and I'm like, what am I supposed to talk about? I felt so awkward, so shy. There were 20, 30 people looking at me. And I just somehow answered that and went back to my seat feeling terrified about the experience.
I hope listeners are paying attention that this is the same person who was shy at one time and was afraid to get on the stage is now running a YouTube channel and is consistent from past 1 year.
Thank you, Francis.
Okay, so my next question is, what is the best piece of advice someone ever gave you?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is my dad's advice that he always tell me, you lead by example. And that's something I truly believe in myself. So anything that you do, there are going to be people that are younger than you or your peers or even people that are older than you. It doesn't mean that you need to be a manager. It doesn't mean that you're going to be like, a big word leader, like you need to lead a group of people. You can be like, a leader of yourself, a leader of people that might just see you and hear you. And they can be your classmate and they can be anyone that you know in your life. But just be a good person and grow and try your best in living your life and try your best in helping others and just do things that matters to you and that are helpful. And that's how you will lead by example and just be the best version of yourself.
Wow, that's a great advice by your father. I love that. So what is there any worst advice someone ever gave you?
Actually, I can mention something here. Well, I wouldn't say it's a worst advice, but it's something that I wouldn't want to follow. And every person have their own perspective on things, and especially different generations have different experiences.
Mhm.
And some might not understand what you are going through because you have your own path and your own experience.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to do something creative, you want to start a YouTube channel, but someone from 2 generations before didn't understand what social media is. They would tell you, hey, get a job in a bank, get a job in a more stable, a stable organization. Why do you do all of this? Just wasting your time. And this would be something that I would not want to listen to. And I would encourage people to just listen to their heart and, follow what their hearts are telling them to do.
It is difficult to explain to the older generation about social media and various opportunities that are available nowadays. But I also understand from where they're coming. They come from a place of concern and they want you to choose like a better option, a safer option that is there. Okay, Mika, so who's your go-to person when you feel stuck?
Who is my go-to person when I feel stuck? Well, right now, currently, I have to say that the first person I go to when I feel stuck is my boyfriend. If I sound very tacky, I mean, I would love to say it's like parents or friends or anything, right? But when you're abroad, the closest person to you is going to be your life partner, or if you don't have one, it's going to be your closest friend, right? And right now, the closest people that is next to me is my partner, my boyfriend. And we have a really good bond. We understand each other's paths and lives and past and future. And basically, it just gives me a lot of comfort to have someone in my life who can understand what I'm going through. And I can always reach out to when I have some struggles.
Okay. So, Mika, what has been your favorite job you have had?
Uh, all of the jobs. I love all of them. To be honest, like I have to be honest with this because, you always say if you have not a very good part-time job, you're not going to love it. But I've learned it a hard way. I would say that you just have to love everything and every single thing that you do and comes your way. My first part-time job here in Canada was working in a motel as a front desk. And not only I had to just doing the client, like the customer face things in the front desk, I also had to go to clean rooms. I had to make beds and I have to do all the, background things that I wouldn't want to do like at a job because I want like work, more professional things. But I have to say that during that time, I've learned that it's just my mindset that matters. Because even with cleaning and making beds and, dealing with bad customers, I've learned so much from it. And I cannot be grateful enough to all the experiences that I've had. So even with that type of job and the corporate job that I have right now in an advertising agency, all of them are experiences that I just love, and I'm happy that they've been experiences in my life like that.
Oh, yes. Every job teaches you something that just stays with you for the rest of your life. So, Mika, I do see that you make a lot of food on your vlog. But if you had to eat just one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I always have a hard time to answer this one. You know why? I love all the foods and I can eat anything any day. And especially for myself, I always have a hard time with this question because I have divided. Is it like the Russian foods that I want to eat for the rest of my life, or is it the Vietnamese ones? Because I love both of them, and they're so different. It's like if I have to choose one thing, it probably would be potatoes, because
Okay.
they're so versatile, and you can eat them in any forms. It can be French fries, it can be baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, and the Russians eat a lot of potatoes, so that's something that like feels very close to my heart. Yeah, but I wouldn't be able to give up Vietnamese food.
Okay. So, next is what did you recently buy that you now regret?
If you know me, you would probably know. If you know me, if you're close, you would probably know that I'm very considerate about
Okay.
things that I purchase. Yeah, like I don't spend money on things that I don't need. So it's like very hard for me to mention anything that I actually buy, because every single piece that I buy, I would literally use it until it dies. One thing I regret is just because I bought myself a ring light and I broke it a week after.
Oh, no.
So I don't know if it's a purchase that I regret or more so how I deal with things sometimes.
Okay. So, are you a night owl or an early bird?
It depends on the day. Today I was a night owl and I woke up really late. But usually I love to be an early bird as well, because I feel like mornings, I feel like, better of myself. And when I wake up, I'm like, oh, I'm waking up, I'm ready to tackle the day. So a lot of times I love waking up early just to do things. But I find that when I wake up early, I get really sleepy really early in the day. And like during the lunchtime, I'm just out. I can't do anything because I'm so tired. So I try to find this balance. Some days when I feel better, I wake up early. Some days I feel very creative at night. So I would just stay up and do things that I gotta do and sleep in. And that's totally fine as well.
Okay, so it's mix of both. So what's that one video, Mika, you recommend all listeners to must see on your channel?
I would say that all of my last shorts that I've been creating the past months, they're all food related. And I've been finding myself loving my food experiences, because from food, you will be able to see my personal journey, because I give some of the videos, I share my experiences as well with a voiceover. And some of the things will have, a Vietnamese touch to it, and some of the things will have the Russian touch to it. So when you see the journey from someone like me with like such a different background, maybe you can get inspired and do something of your own as well.
Okay, I'll also recommend our listeners to make sure you have had your food before you start watching, otherwise you'll get hungry.
That's true. Or you can watch it to get hungry and recreate it.
Sure, that could work as well. Perfect. So, Mika, my last question is describe Canada in one word or a sentence.
Diversity. That's one word that I choose. Like one thing that I love about Canada is the moment you walk in, you will feel like home, because everyone is different and you won't feel different, because you will feel fit in right away in the communities that they have and the people that surround you here.
And it is all because of that diversity that today you and me are talking. A guy from India and a girl from Russia is sitting face to face and sharing their life journeys. On that note, Mika, thank you for being on the podcast and adding value to my listeners.
Thank you so much for having me today, Grasis, and good luck to everyone on their journeys.
Hey, listener, thank you for making it to the end. I highly, highly appreciate you listening the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't as yet, and please share with your friends or anybody you think would like it. And like I always say, we encourage you to follow your heart, but also us on Instagram. The handle is mythicaccent. You can also leave us a review or write to us at hello@mythicaccent.com. So stay tuned and let's continue knowing each other beneath the accent.